All right, hi everyone, welcome to a tactics video. This time how to use the Attilan Rough Riders. A very special video for us today. I'm going to be joined by a friend and patron of the channel to help me basically speak about how to effectively use the Attilan Rough Rider unit for the Astra Militarum. So just like the other videos I've done in this playlist here, my focus on these videos is to actually speak about how to use the unit, less about are they a meta or non-meta choice, but of course I'll touch on that. And as said, for this video, I'm bringing in an expert because for this unit, I personally haven't used them much or used them effectively. So I actually called in a friend and patron, Guardsman Medicaid Luke Rolfe. So Guardsman, do you want to say hello and a bit of an intro to who you are?
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Jeff. So my name's Luke Rolfe. I'm one of the patrons for Jeff's channel. I'm located in the United States of America in the state of Indiana. If anyone's familiar with it, it's pretty close to Louisville, Kentucky. It's kind of the meta that I participate in from a 40K standpoint. I'm a guard player through and through. That's my main army. I probably, all I really need to tell you is I own 30 Leman Russ battle tanks, so I have plenty of guard models. I do have a small collection of knights that I play frequently, and then Kroot is a passion project of mine. I just recently took him out to a tournament this last weekend, and enjoy doing that quite.
And look, you also just to quickly, you're a bit of a tournament organizer as well. Is that right?
Yep. I've over the last 3 years, I've started off with my first RTT had 6 people at it, and now we average 20. And this August, we're going to be running our first grand tournament in Clarksville, Indiana. If anyone wants to come check it out, it's actually featured on the front page of Best Coast Pairings. You can just see it right there, Romeric Industries GT.
Wow. Okay. I'll put some details of that in the description below. So make sure if you're based in the US where Luke said to come check it out. So thank you, Luke. So let's get so saddle up. Let's get cracking. And there's going to be loads of horse puns. Me and Luke are going to enjoy ourselves. So just like the other videos, I'll basically go over the data sheet quickly, speak about the negatives of the unit, the positives, and how to effectively use it. So let's ground ourselves firstly in the actual data sheet. So let's move through this quite quickly. So let's jump to a couple of key points. This unit can be taken in groups of 5 or 10, led by a sergeant with 4 to 9 Rough Rider models. As for the core data sheet, they move 12 inches, got a toughness of 4 plus save, 2 wounds, leadership 7, OC 1 per model. Now, weaponry, they are each equipped with a las gun, las pistol, which is good for both some very light range shooting plus also close combat shooting. And from a melee point of view, I believe the sergeant can take a goad lance, but everyone else takes a hunting lance, which is either a frag tip or melter tip, which you can choose.
So hold the horses there, Jeff.
Oh, yes, please.
So the sergeant could, in theory, take a goad lance. It's every 5 models in the unit. You can give any one model a goad lance. You won't normally do that because the sergeant is able to be equipped with a power saber. There's no downside to that. It's just an additional war gear option. And the power saber and goad lance kind of want to swing into the same things. So I would probably spread those out. But you do have the option. Okay. There's nothing that says you couldn't give it to the sergeant.
Roger. Thank you. And then they've each got, the horses have got 2 attacks each, which is obviously very helpful as well. Now for keywords, and these are important, they do have grenade, which in Astra Militarum, as you can see from Wipeout, isn't that unique, but actually in the wider 40K universe it is. They then got regiment, which is important for both for army rule and several of the detachments. Now for their ability, horse masters means they can fall back, shoot and charge. And I will speak about it in a second, or Luke might, but this is actually quite a unique ability for Astra Militarum. Now points, 60 points for 5, 120 points for 10. And I would say, and please, Guardsman Luke, I think they are quite effectively costed at the moment at 60 and 120.
Yay or nay? I have 20, pretty much. Yeah, yay for me. No, nay. It's only the horses nay here. But I run 20 in almost every list I make. 2 10-man bricks because it's better for order efficiency.
We've got the right stallion for the job right here. If you've got 20, Luke. So, all right, let's keep this up. So, okay, so let's focus on the negatives of what this unit won't do. So these are some points I've identified. So mounted keyword and the lack of the infantry keyword and relatively big bases. They've got the oval bases, which as per what we saw before, a 60 by 35 mil does mean that even a 5 or a 10 model unit size actually is quite a big footprint, which is both a positive and a negative, which can contribute to the classic Astra Militarum car park problem. So definitely for newer players who aren't used to maneuvering around terrain, given these models can't move through most terrain, particularly in competitive play, you could run into a problem of basically just jamming yourself up. And if your opponent is aggressive, does a turn one charge, for example, it could be quite problematic for the rest of your game. Now, they are relatively squishy. You saw a toughness 4+ save 2 wounds. Now, that is going to be balanced by a point Luke will make in a moment, but they are still quite squishy. And in combat, they're pretty much a glass cannon. Because if you go into anything remotely serious from the melee point of view, the clapback will probably pick up most of these models, if they're a decent melee unit, of course, the opponent. Now, this is one I constantly say of a lot of things, is that this will require a relatively strong understanding of the fight and charge and fight phase to effectively use them. And that's something a lot of guard players, including me, simply don't have. So it's going to take a lot of practice. Now, please provide an alternate view here, Luke, but I kind of get the impression they're probably only good in blocks of 10. And that means at 120 points, you've got a lot of options to choose from. So you've got Kazkin at 110, you've got Tempestus Aquilans, you've got a 20-man block of Death Quarter Krieg. So they might be effectively costed themselves, but compared to the rest of the codex, you've got a lot of other good choices. That's going to be a classic problem.
I agree. I wouldn't often bring 5 of them. I think that especially the way the bases work, and when you start piling in, they get to it's so easy to get all 10 of them to be able to fight with the way that you can position the bases, that you just get really good value out of those extra 5 horses being dragged along behind.
Okay. Yeah, so definitely this is, again, from a consideration point of view, it's both a big brick of models, 10 models, which is a car park problem, and also 120, you have the choice of other potentially better units. Now, definitely, and this will tie into the positives, but the Melter Lance, only 1 attack, I think is still quite risky because you've only then got 10 attacks. Okay, 10 attacks. You can make him hit on 2s. You're going to be wounding most vehicles on 4s because of the Lance keyword, but still, it's only 10 attacks. And just a bit of trivia is that in 9th edition, you actually had 2 Melter Lance attacks each, which made this unit very good. And another key one to keep in mind, but it only affects 1 detachment, is not having now that the detachment stratagem combined arms reinforcements requires it to be at regiment infantry, you can no longer reinforce this unit, which you could do in the index. But again, we've now got more detachments, so it's only 1 detachment, but it is a crucial one that you can't reinforce.
So, Jeff, if you don't mind me butting in here for a second, everyone, we've already used this pun once, but one of my favorite things to do is when someone killed the 10 horses on the index is you would pick them up and say, now hold your horses. I'm going to pay 2 CP to put them back in reserves. Good.
Hold your horse. Exactly. Thank you, Luke. Good. Yeah, good point. Now, but saddle up. We're now going to have Luke speak about the positives of this unit. So Horsemaster Rolf, please take it away.
Yeah, so it probably is the single most credible melee threat that Guard has access to. The only other one that comes to mind is even a consideration for a melee threat is Bulgrin. And as anyone who's used Bulgrin and charged them into some Space Marines or something understands all too well, that AP1 really comes back to bite you because Strength 7 is not that great. You're not wounding virtually anything on 2s that you care about. And then you have the AP1, so they're saving on a pretty decent roll. So your efficiency bleeds off. You can't give them orders, so you're hitting on 3s. So, compared to Bulgrin, you give these guys fixed bayonets. That takes the lances to hitting on 2s. It takes the horses to hitting on 3s. And then suddenly you think about, okay, well, what things would I really like to charge with this? And my favorite 3 targets for the Melta Lances are Imperial Knights. You might be like, well, Imperial Knights, that's not so good because you're wounding on 4s, right? To your point, Jeff. But your AP4, it doesn't work in melee. They're invulnerable save. They don't get that invulnerable save in melee, and AP4 cuts them straight past it. So there is no saving throw. So you just get your 10 lances in. You probably hit 8 of them. You get 4 through, and on average, that's 13.5 damage. So you pretty much will drop any armiger that you go into and seriously bang up any big knight. Additionally, you talk about the 10 attacks is pretty risky. Well, you put them into something, say, like Terminators. The biggest thing that gets you on Terminators is actually the damage being D6, because you're hitting them on 2s if you have fixed bayonets. You're then wounding them on 2s because it's Strength 9 with Lance. AP4 is going to put them on their invul save, so you're going to get pretty much the same amount of wounds through 4 or 5. as you would a knight, because the invulnerable save is going to counter that out. And then you're going to drop about a third of those. So you're going to probably kill 3 models. You might kill 4 if you're lucky. There is something you can do to offset that. And I've had to clarify this with my opponent because it's a little confusing. So you say, hey, I'm not going to roll the hooves. I'm not going to make the hoof attacks. They are attacking, but they're going to hit directly before each lance strike. And I'm going to only roll it out if the lance fails to kill the target. And essentially the idea being is, you're swinging at Marines, right? The lance goes through, you roll a 1 on your damage. You then take your 2 horse hoofs to try and kick that Marine to death before you move on to your next lance. And because you have it structured like that, you don't have to actually slow roll your dice, because you've declared every lance is going to be followed immediately by 2 hooves. So you just roll all the lances. Any lance that fails to kill, you get 2 kicks. You're actually shorting yourself some attacks when you think about it. And I've had very few opponents that have had a problem with me doing that, and it speeds up, makes the unit play very quickly. So aside from the heavy targets, right, because the melt to lance in and of itself is pretty good, these things annihilate other chaff. Like you're playing into someone who has some T3 bodies. Well, they have that las rifle. So they're getting 2 shots apiece with their gun. They charge in, they get 2 horse kicks that are at strength 4, and then they get D6 attacks each with their frag lance. This has lance. So if you give them fixed bayonets into, like, say, other guardsmen, some filthy traitors, you charge in there, hitting on 2s, wounding on 2s, you're going to just annihilate 20-man bricks easily. You might be able to tag into 2. It's one of the most effective ways to clear chaff. And because they have those las guns, they kind of can kill screens on their own. So they run up, someone has some like 10 catagens or something in front of their tank that they want to protect. You shoot the hell out of that with your las gun, and then you charge past where those guys were into the heavy target behind it. I kind of alluded to this a little bit before, but their bases are actually a benefit. I'd have to double check the math on this, but these models have a pivot value of 1, meaning you have to pay 1 inch of movement to pivot them from like this to this. And when you actually do the math on that, they actually pick up movement when they do that, because paying an inch, you actually gain about half an inch of movement. Which can be kind of cheeky. I usually end up explaining this to my opponent, letting them measure one of the bases before the game goes off, and just saying I'm not going to worry about pivoting, because if I'm ever pivoting, it's actually helping me, unless I'm just slightly repositioning my model, like I'm going from this to like this. And that's not something most people really fuss about. Usually pivots are more about trying to make sure you can get around a wall or something. They also work really well as a screen. So a lot of times I'll run them up for some Terminators, and my opponent, to your point, Jeff, they're like, I'm going to kill these on the clapback. And I just don't charge. You just leave them there. You give them the take cover order, and now you have this massive, like it takes up an incredible amount of board space of horses that are essentially Space Marines. And while Space Marines are not the hardest thing to kill, for 120 points to kill 10 of them, that's not something that most armies can do efficiently. And that take cover does work in shooting and in melee. So if you're going into armies that have a lot of AP1 melee, getting yourself to be on that 4-up save instead of getting the +1 to hit can be really beneficial. And also, I like to think about the math of it. Like I do a lot of question asking when I'm going into my opponents. I'm starting to think about, okay, where this is the go turn for the horses. I start asking about melee profiles. Okay, how many attacks does that thing get in close combat? How many attacks do they get in close combat? What's the damage on that? Because if you can find a unit that you're going to charge, and after expected casualties, they're not going to do 20 wounds to a toughness 4 3-up save target, you are guaranteeing that is not going to get away from these horses, which is just fantastic. You just bog them down and take it up. The other thing, the Datasheet ability, the natural horse riders or whatever that's called, it's phenomenal. Like you want to talk about fast melee armies, your world eaters, your emperor's children, they come in and they just smash up and tag all your tanks before they get to go. If you use horses as your second layer of, like, I call it bubble wrap. So you put like your catagens up front, you put your horses directly behind. After they kill your catagens, they are not going to tag those horses. And if they do, they're making a mistake, because you just get to swing at them for free. You get that extra pile and consolidate movement to start getting yourself up the board. And then you just fall back, moving directly past them. You shoot them with everything else, and if they're still there, you charge them back in with the horses, or the horses are now passed and they're charging into something else. But that's really good for buying you a little bit of that breathing room that as guard players we all struggle to get, because you just kind of push them back. I love the fact that they have the grenade keyword. they almost always are the ones who are throwing my grenades in my army. And the reason being is because their shooting is not valuable, right? Because of the nature of the way the grenade keyword works and the grenade strat works, you have to throw that grenade before you do your shots. So say these horses are running up alongside, say, some Casterkin, I can go ahead and take the shots with the Casterkin. If that melta gun pops off and just annihilates whatever I was going into, maybe I save the CP. I don't need the grenade. But if I get down to the very end, I know I need those extra mortal wounds. I can throw that grenade right before I fire their las guns, and I don't really miss anything for it. I mentioned the fallback, shoot, and charge. There's 2 units that can do this. I run both of them in my guard armies because I love that utility. We have a lot of fast melee in our local meta. And the other one is the Cadian Castellan. That's the one. So you can potentially put him in with a group of 20 guardsmen. You have your Cadians up front, first layer of bubble wrap, and then you have your horses directly behind, and someone smashes into you, and whatever is left is just going to blow them to hell, because you're going to scatter past them. You're going to get up the board, which you're not normally going to be doing. Sometimes you're charging, sometimes you're just shooting, but it lets you get up there. And then just going back to the deceptively tough part, again, for 120 points, if you give them take cover, they're essentially Space Marines, like intercessors. Like, not even the Space Marine factions get that amount of durability. Never mind at speed 12. If you're not going to charge with them, you can advance them. You're probably going to go 15.5 inches. So yeah, anyway, I love these units. Obviously a big fan. I've had a lot of success with them, but that's definitely some of the things I think are very good for them. Yeah.
And straight from the horse's mouth, hearing Luke speak about this, very good. But another one I wanted to say with the keyword is they also obviously have regiment. And this compared to, say, Bolgrams is crucial because it means, as I said at the beginning of the video, they benefit from the army rule, but also there are several detachments which this keys off. And then several detachments, I believe, Luke, there are some actual specific stratagems which support them. But I'm not going to go through them, but there are some stratagems that support.
Yeah, and just touching base on the regiment real quick, I didn't really touch on orders, but this is one of the few units in the game for Guard that literally every single order you can issue to it offers value. Like fixed bayonets, incredible melee threat. Take aim, maybe you're not going to get close enough. You just really need those last gun shots. Like a unit with take aim might be able to take out another unit of cultists or something like that. It's not super likely, but they're at least going to bang them up before they charge in. First ring fire, second ring fire, they have rapid fire guns. You can double your shots if you just want a lot of volume going through. Duty and honor. Okay, so now we have a speed 12 unit that can charge. That gets +1 to its battle shock, +1 to its OC. So they're all OC2 horses now, which is just phenomenal. They take cover, they get full benefit from as a 4-up save. It takes them to a 3-up, both in melee and in shooting. So yeah, I really like that they respond well to every order you can give them. Obviously, move's fantastic. 15-inch threat range just on basic movement.
Yeah, great point, mate. Great point. Nice. Okay, so I need this one again. Saddle up. Let's go to effective use. So myself and Luke are going to go through this together. But let me do the first one, Luke, if you don't mind. So
sure.
This is obvious when you say it, but if you are playing competitively or even casually, you want to study your deployment zones, and this is where if you want to get super planned into it, is actually spend time on Tabletop Simulator or just measure that on the kitchen table on a deployment. Where can these models actually get? Because given they don't have infantry keyword, they have to move around terrain, and again, for a lot of us less experienced players with mounted models, this can present a problem. Now, this is something I spoke about in previous videos, that they have obviously a threat bubble. So unlike shooting army or shooting, which has got a threat lane, this has got a threat bubble, so you can charge out. But given they can't move through terrain, as I said before, you need to be understanding where they can actually get to. Now, as Luke spoke about, they effectively have a movement 15 with the movement plus a 12-inch movement. So you've got a lot of movement there. But you do want to be making sure you understand where they're going to deploy. Are they centrally deployed? Are they protecting your home deployment, your home objective? Are they going for your expansion objective? But also, I think a great one, and Luke, please give your perspective here. I think probably a really good use of them as a rapid ingress threat, or just bring in from reserves, because that's where you have a lot more flexibility. Granted, you have to be within 6 of the board edge. But any perspectives on this, Luke, about sort of...
Yeah. So it's actually interesting. We have one of the nation's best Tau players in our local meta, and I started to allude to my favorite targets to put these horses into. The reason I actually started putting them on the table was ghost kills. I don't know if you fought a Tau player and they get that ghost kill, they infiltrate it, they run and they start tagging you and stuff. Well, there's one very important thing about a ghost kill. It's toughness 8. That means the Melta Lance wounds it on 2s as a strength 9 lance weapon.
Glorious.
And AP 4, they don't have an invulnerable save, takes them straight to the
mount up, fellas. Straight in. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. So I actually, the first time I used him, he'd never seen him on the table before because no one runs these things. And I rapid ingressed a unit of horses, and he literally conceded. He's like, "Oh wow, that's the whole game," because I put him behind cover where he couldn't interact with them. He didn't have a strong Overwatch threat. Knowing that I was going to move 15 inches out and charge into his Crisis Suit brick, I was just going to pick it up. Like they were all just going to be dead because it hits them on 2s, wounds them on 2s, and then D6s of damage is not something they can afford to take.
Oh, and that's glorious, Luke. Glorious. Right. So now the next point, I think Luke was sort of touching it there. Now, and I probably need your guidance here, Medicaid Rolf, is that again, this for me is probably a key piece that I never will be able to sort of manage effectively. Is that they will trade up, as Luke has spoken about a lot, but if you don't effectively do so, they will basically die in the clapback. So, how to effectively target something into them is, I think, a crucial one. But any thoughts here, Luke? Because this for me is a pretty big one. Is what do you put them into, in inverted commas?
Yeah. So the way that I tend to play these horses is I end up having a unit position between the middle and my natural expansion, and then I position the second unit between my opponent's natural expansion in the middle. And the idea being that with 15 inches of movement, they can probably sit behind a ruin, completely concealed, and then they will be able to go and charge whatever moves on to either of those points. And basically, the thing that I'm looking for, they sit there until they see something that they're relatively good into come out there onto that objective. Or if I think that my opponent's trying to stage to come in on my objective, I might just move them and make a wall with them, right? Because what you're talking about with them dying in the clapback, that's their job. As a 120-point unit, their job is to die in the clapback. But that is, again, all about buying you breathing room. They're not a particularly durable unit. The only time I've had success with them operating over the course of the whole game participating is if they played a flank really hard. And it was just one of those layouts of terrain where they could charge into a chaff unit. I think I was playing Gene Stealer cults. They'd charge into some cultists, annihilate them with the volume of attacks they had, and then they'd be in a position where they were still obscured from the rest of his army. Next turn, 15 inches of move gets them to the next target, and they just kind of bounced their way around the board. And they were there most of the game. Took a few casualties here and there from them, incidental fire. But yeah, that's kind of what I wait for. You're looking for vehicles without invulnerable saves, including knights, because again, they do not get that invulnerable save in close combat. You're looking for potentially small 3-man units of elite infantry, because they would just pick those up. If it's a 6-man, say maybe some Terminators with a captain, you want to be very, think about it. In my head, how many of these things do I think I'm going to kill? And do I think they're going to kill me on the clapback? Because you ideally want to put them into something where they're still tagged at the end of your turn. So they swing back, they kill most of the horses, sure, whatever. You don't care about that as long as one horse survives. So if there's ever an opportunity to commit them where they can't possibly kill all 10 horses, just mathematically they don't have enough melee attacks to do that, that really makes people sweat. And a lot of times they'll end up falling back and leaving the horses alone. This
is a really key point. And I think this is something, this has taken me a long time to get used to. I think it's a point that Luke made, is that like Kazkin, I would say, they're definitely, their job is to do damage and die in inverted commas, and I think that takes a fair bit of. And I remember, I'm just reflecting on my journey. Is it took me a long time to accept that some units just have to die. But as Luke said, if that unit is holding up another unit from advancing, doing a secondary objective, or going to secure another a primary objective, that is beneficial for your game. So it's a really good point Luke's made there. Yeah, do you want to touch on these 2 points, Medicaid, Rolf? So these are two good points you put up. Yeah, go on. So
the lances being targetable. So what do we mean with that? So can you click back to the first slide for a second, Jeff? The actual first slide, the picture of the horses.
Oh, sorry, the picture. Oh, good.
Yeah, you're good. So what we're talking about here is, if you look specifically, the top left horse is one of the worst perpetrators, but that tip of the lance, line of sight is model to model in this game. So if you can see the tip of that lance, you can shoot the unit. So when you're playing, if you're playing against the kind of opponent that would do that to you, usually you have a pretty good idea. If there's your buddy, probably not going to be a problem. But if you're at a competitive event, you just want to assume that they're going to. That way you don't set yourself up for failure. So when you're moving these units, say this was my unit of horses that I was moving around, I would flip them all around so all the lances were pointing towards the sergeant in this picture, because that lowers their profile and lets you better hide them. behind obscuring. It looks a little silly, but ultimately, the models are supposed to look pretty when you're looking at them for display. When they're playing, they're just pieces. So that's what I tend to do if I'm playing at a tournament. If I'm playing a casual game with my buddies, I'm not as concerned if they decide to take a shot at a lance with a tank and blow away a few horses. Then just so be it. But anyway, you can click back to the other slide, Jeff. I just wanted to give that visual.
Really good
what
point.
I was talking about. And I already talked about this, but they do have a pivot value of 1. I'm pretty sure that they're technically, and I don't do this regularly because I think the whole thing's kind of cheeky. But I'm fairly certain if you brought them out of strategic reserves and say that I'm measuring this way for my 9 inches, if I bring them in here and put them sideways, if I declare my charge, I can pay for the pivot to straighten the horse, and now I have an 8-inch charge because I've gained about half an inch of movement by pivoting. So I think you could technically get 8-inch charges out of reserves. I don't do that. I haven't really bothered, but just hypothetically, I think that's how that works. Yeah.
And I just realized I don't think you can see our face audience, but I think what you're saying, Luke, is if you can see my faded out phone, is that you set them up from deep strike like that, side on. You then basically charge them, and then you can pivot them because does that make sense? Like, so you charge them like straight on like that, and then when they pivot, is that what you mean? Is that how it works?
Yeah, because it costs you 1 inch of movement, but you gain about 1.5 inches off the center of the base when you do that. So you pick up half an inch, and if you gain 1 millimeter, that's enough to shorten the charge by 1 inch because of the way that the coming out of reserves works.
Oh, that's really nice. Yeah. But even if not, just generalized movement, that means that you can actually milk out a bit more movement. Yeah, because
and I touched on that a little bit at the start, Jeff. And that's one of the reasons why I tell my opponents I'm usually just not going to worry about it because it's actually beneficial for me to fuss with it. And by not fussing with it, I'm kind of just like it's a wash, right? I'm just going to move the horses around. I'm not really worry about pivoting them because they actually gain movement when they pivot. So anytime they argue with me, I just talk about it's any base that from the center to the tip is more than its pivot value gains movement from twisting. And I believe it's 1.5 inches from the center to the edge, and they cost 1 inch to pivot. So if you start them sideways, you lose that half of your base, but then you gain the length of your base. It ends up making you faster.
Yeah, and I'm sure like a lot of other armies will have this as well. Like I can imagine Drakari with all of the like little go-kart flying things will be the same thing as well. But that's really good, man. Cool. Okay. Now, Medicaid, Rolf, you spoke about the sequencing of attacks. Do you want to talk about that a bit more?
Yeah, sure. So let's say I'm fighting you, Jeff, right? I charge my horses into some of your Bulgrin. And I'm like, okay, so I know this probably isn't going to kill. Each lance is not going to be very likely to kill you, but rather than roll all the hooves and then all the lances, I'm going to go ahead and sequence my attack: lance, hoof, lance, hoof, lance, hoof, lance, hoof, lance, hoof. And then I roll all my lances, right? I pull out the misses, I roll all my wounds, I pull out the failed wounds, and then I ask you to make your save. So every time you fail a save, I then say, oh, did that kill? I roll my damage. Okay, it didn't kill. I'm going to take my 2 horse hoofs now because I've actually been doing this after every attack. But I'm not bothering to roll the dice because they don't matter if the lance overkills you. It doesn't matter that you then got kicked twice by a horse.
Got it.
But it does help kind of, especially into like marine bodies or even maybe like Terminator equivalents that don't have the 2-up armor save. Sometimes that extra like horse hoof will just knock that damage in, and it buys you an extra lance attack essentially. If you want to take the time to slow roll it, say you're playing on a clock, you have the time, it's near the end of the game, it's really pivotal. Saying that you're going to structure it that way, and then you roll out 2 horse kicks, then you roll the lance, then you roll 2 horse kicks, then you roll the lance. It is actually possible to end up essentially getting 4 horse kicks into the same target. If you do it that way. So it's a little more optimal to slow roll it. But I don't generally do that. Like I said, it's going to make so small a difference in so few edge cases that it's just one of those things that I remember doing because, again, sometimes you need that 1 extra wound just to kick the Space Marine down so that you can then roll the next dice. Yeah,
it's just, again, this is why I bring in an expert. This, I think, is a really good point. So if we go back, so you can see our pretty faces, but that means you would roll 10 dice in one pile. So these are the lance attacks. I then roll 20 dice, which are the horse hoofs. And given the only 1 damage, it doesn't matter. So then it's interesting. So you say, okay, opponent, save on this model. Okay, you fail that save. I roll 2 damage. I'll assign these 2. Yeah, okay. Yeah, because that...
Well, sort of. So you never actually roll the lance attacks. Or not the lance. I'm sorry. You never roll the hoof attacks. So you roll the 10 lances. And then anytime a lance fails to kill its target, you then take your 2 hoof attacks. Because the idea being is if the lance kills the target outright, the horse hooves are wasted. If it doesn't kill them outright, then you have those two hoof kicks that would hit sequentially before the next lance did, and then you can resolve those then.
Got it. Okay. No, this is really good because obviously melter tips, the risk, it's risque. Yeah, it could be a 1-2 damage and a 3 or 4 model, 3 wound model. And that's where the risk is. But this is a great way to sort of help with that. So
it mitigates it a little bit for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Now we have what I call the melee finesse, and this is why you bring in an expert at jousting, Luke here. But do you want to touch on these 2 points? Because these were points I was not aware of. But you want to take it away, Luke?
So there's a lot of confusion around the way that heroic intervention works. So the way heroic intervention reads from memory, mind you, I'm not reading this directly in front of me, but you pick a unit that ends a charge move within 6 inches of you that charges your models. You pay a command point, you then get to charge them. But it says that you don't get the charge bonus. The charge bonus is a defined thing. You can look it up in the app. You can look it up in the rules. That is where fights first comes from. So when you heroically intervene, you don't get fights first. However, all of your abilities like Lance that read when this unit finishes or when this unit has made a charge move trigger. So your lance actually triggers when you heroically intervene because you have made a charge move, because you did charge on your opponent's turn. You just don't get fights first. And touching into that a second time, something you can do with the bases on these horses is because they're ovals. So if you're trying to get as many in as possible, you place them narrowly, right? And you kind of stagger them like this, very close together, kind of rank and file. But if you, for some reason, don't want to get into close combat with all the horses, you put the first horses sideways like this, and then they kind of block the other horses from getting into base to base. The reason that's important is for my second point. I kind of had this idea when I was playing at a GT, and I was playing against a World Eaters player, and he had his what do they call them? The battle line infantry berserkers. Is that what they're called?
Oh, I don't know. I think so.
Yes. So they have that surge move, right? So you don't want to shoot them. They have fights first, so you don't want to charge them because I think it was a character that was attached or something. But I needed to deal with them. So what I ended up doing is he had just gotten them out of a rhino. So if you can imagine, there's a ruin, there's a rhino next to the ruin, and then immediately adjacent, kind of in front, making almost a little cone of open terrain, is these berserkers. And what that allowed me to do is I charged the rhino, got into combat with the rhino, put the bases sideways to block as much of the space in front of that rhino. So I had like 2 horses like this. They were the only 2 horses that could base. So all the other horses now, they just have to end closer. So they all kind of got closer, but they ended really close, like just outside of an inch of those berserkers. So we go to the fight phase. Okay, fights first turn. My opponent picks first. Do you have any eligible fight first units? He does not, because those guys are not engaged. We then go to me. My horse is charged, and the horses can pile into the closest model. So 8 of those 10 horses then pile into the berserkers and swing their melta lances and their horse hooves over there. And I ended up killing like 7-8 models out of the squad. Because they don't get a save, right? AP4.
Yeah.
So it caught my opponent off guard. Now, this won't work if your opponent has a command point and they understand what you're trying to do. Now, a lot of things that's kind of fun about being a guard player is they don't expect you to understand how melee works. So they might just think that you're being really silly and only charging 2 horses into their rhino and not use their command point. But if they have a command point for heroic intervention, if they heroic into you, they're going to fight before your horses do, and they're going to butcher you. So it's definitely risky, but you can use it to circumvent abilities like fights first, or if they have an ability that triggers when they're charged or anything like that, you can kind of get around it pretty easily because the bases are so wide. You can block yourself off from your primary charge target and then pile into a tertiary target, which I think is at least worth talking about.
Yeah, mate, this is... Now, again, and I'm always the balanced approach on this thing, is that this does require you to intimately know in the stables of the rule set of 40K. Very good. You like that, Luke. But you should, like I just did before this video, I went and read the actual rules for I'm going to screw this up, forgive me, but the charge phase and the fight phase, and there's actual distinct steps and all this stuff you have to understand to basically take advantage of what Luke has spoken about here, because I've used I've used Gaunt's Ghost before. I've charged him into, say, a Kalida's Assassin with fights first and basically screwed up who fought first because of my misunderstanding of how to auto-step. So anyway, but I think this is a really key one, is understanding, firstly, as Luke kindly explained, Lance is triggered when you heroically intervene, and these little jiggery pokery tricks you can do here. Definitely, as we close out the video and get onto the summary, this is by far the most credible melee unit we have in the Guard Codex. Of course, we've got Bolgrams, as Luke spoke about, with the AP1. They're only hitting on 3s, wounding on 3s most things, if they're lucky. Gaunt's Ghost, they've got Fight First. They're cute. They've got Dev Wounds. They're not going to do loads of damage, but this is definitely our single best melee unit in the book. Now, with that, as I said, and as Luke has spoken about a lot, they can effectively trade up. And trade up is all about basically destroying something which is worth more points than they're worth at 120 points for 10 or 60 for 10. And again, this is something I spoke about in previous videos, and as Luke spoke about earlier, is that they are a very strong counter-charge threat. And that's where you do some careful deployment tricks. You basically have your chaff up front, 5 inches away, 4 inches away. You've got your glorious Rough Riders waiting to basically heroically intervene to something which is quite nasty. But now, again, this is a good point Luke spoke about, and also myself, but they are quite squishy, but they're actually tankier than most, obviously, Guard infantry, of course, because as Luke kindly said, you can make them have a 3-up save if you go to Wahapedia. A 3-up save, toughness 4 with 2 wounds, as Luke said, makes them Space Marines. Now, they're not invincible, but they're definitely more survivable than some Kazkin, some Jungle Fighters, etc. Because toughness 4, 3+ save, 2 wounds is actually quite strong. And obviously, we've got cover. You're going to be taking a fair bit of damage, more so than other stuff. Now, this is one, and please, Luke, please interject it as you see fit. But this, of course, is a problem. Not a problem, but it's a key decision point for Bolgrams, 110 points, and 120 points for 10 Rough Riders. You've got a lot of other options. And Luke, give me your perspective. But I think at this point range, the most meta choice competitively is Kazkin at the moment. They're effectively used a lot by some of the top players. But any thoughts on these 3 points, Luke, for the summary?
Yeah, so I know we're kind of reining it in here, but the 120 point mark is very, very competitive in the Guard Codex. You have Casterkin, you have Bolgrin, to your point, you have Attilans, the Hellhound at 125. That is your 20-man brick of Guardsman Chaff, or your flavor of Katie and Catagen, whatever. You could bring 2 units of Ratlings. Like, there's a lot of things you can get in Guard for 120 points. So you have to be fairly confident you're going to be able to utilize these guys to make them feel worth it in your list. But one of my favorite things about them is that once people know what they can do and they ask the stat lines on it, and they're like, what's the damage on that? You're like, D6. Like, these are one of those few units. It's kind of like the Demolisher Cannon. Like, this has the damage potential to kill anything. Like, there's not one unit in the game that if all your dice roll 6s and all your opponent's dice roll 1s that you wouldn't kill, like, and then overkill to some measure. So it's pretty interesting. Like, I like to call that the they'll kill God effect. And when my opponents are asking what they'll do, I'm like, they're kind of swingy, right? They're going to wound most of your stuff on 4s, but if I pop off, they can one-shot a Primarch, because they have the damage potential to do it. And it's happened to me one time, and it's glorious. Nothing beats a bunch of horses running up and a Hail Mary attempt to stop Magnus the Red or whatever from crashing through your lines, and he just gets exploded by lances after bouncing off some horrible saves on your tanks.
And I've just added a point here, and I don't want to make the summary too big, but this definitely is a key part. Is as Luke's kindly said there, the mind games are what they can do, because they can, as Luke has said, flatten pretty much everything in the game they can. Will they? Maybe, maybe not. But just having that threat is enough to sort of dictate your opponent's behavior on the tabletop. So it's a really good point.
Yeah, for sure. I call that, you have to let your opponent have the ability to make bad choices. I think a lot of the skew armies don't have this option, because you see the 13 Chaos War Dogs list. Well, there's not really a bad choice to be made, right? You just pick which one, the Carnivore or Brigand's more threatened to you, and you just kill all of them, right? There's not really any choice to be made. Your opponent has a very straightforward plan, and it's just going to come down to, do they have the oomph to answer the question that your list is asking? But Guard tends to be more of a Swiss Army knife, right? Like, it's toolbox faction. And I think this is just another tool, right? You have your You have your ratlings to screen. You have your Attillans to be a countercharge threat. You have your big scary tank that's about to pull out and blast them into the sun. Maybe it hits on fours. Maybe it won't. So it's just one of those. It's just one more layer to make your opponent have to think about too much, so they make a mistake, and that lets you capitalize and win.
Yeah, great point. Great points, Luke. Right, and for the final point, and we've both spoken about this, but again, for everybody in the GAR community, you know, be it the newer players coming into the faction, or even some experienced players like myself, I think this unit have to have a lot of reps or a lot of practice, and a lot of practice with this unit, using them effectively, because they are a glass cannon. They will hit very hard. And also, again, as I keep saying, not having infantry keyword means they have to be placed carefully, deployed carefully to get to the right target. So you want to probably have a lot of practice with them to effectively use them. But that's it. You can now ride off into the sunset with your really strong knowledge of the Attilan Rough Riders. So just like everything, got any questions or comments about how to effectively do it, please let me know in the comments. I try to always answer them. And I usually leave a little love hut to let you know I've actually seen the video, seen the comments. And I really thank Guardsman Medicare Roth for joining me from the US to give me his expert knowledge as a horse master of the Attilan Rough Riders. So if you enjoy this video, want to support me, you can do so by like, comment, or by subscribing, sharing the video. If you're super keen, you can become a Patreon Platoon member like Guardsman Medicare Rolf there, and you get a little miniature assigned to you at the end of the video on the roll call. Also become a channel member, or simply just watch more of my videos. So I really appreciate all the support my patrons and channel members give me, including Guardsman Medicare Rolf, and super thanks to Luke again. So keep your bayonet sharp, lasgun oiled. Faith for the Emperor strong. Patreon Platoon. Sound off. Tank Commander Glenn, Tank Commander Mitchell, Tank Commander Watchdog Van Etten, Lieutenant Burke Nielsen, Lieutenant Smith, Colour Sergeant DuPont, Sergeants Adal, Scott, to Colonel Merrill, Veterans Gibson, Hall, Lundeen, Guardsman Beard, Coquelin, Easingwood, Hills, Lyons, Malik, Nitton, Medicare Rolf, Tontkin, Conscripts England, Evangyan, Goodwin, Honorary Members Bolgram King, Psyker Smith, Cyan Gaylard, Aquilon Nassine.